Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about feasibility analysis. You may have heard of the term feasibility a lot, but let's find out what it actually means for a business problem solving. Feasibility is the likelihood of successful implementation of the strategy. In any strategy, we would aim at having a high value to the user, that is the effectiveness, as well as high feasibility. Using an extreme case about COVID lockdown, an effective strategy would be putting everyone at home that they cannot leave their home at all. However, it is not feasible, and that's why there are no governments that can implement it very strictly. Here we have an example of a high value to user but low feasibility strategy, and we cannot successfully implement it. So in any strategy suggestion, we would then need to think about how to improve the feasibility in order to have it successfully implement and have take the effect. For feasibility, we usually look into the financial, human, technology, and also the intangible factors. For financial capital, it is the basis of almost any of the strategies because when you make a change, you need the financial resources to have it done. For instance, you need to initiate and sustain the ongoing implementation. That includes the staff cost, the material cost, and also the technology system cost. It links to the second requirement about human capital. First off, the talents needed for that strategy should be in the organization already or available in the market that you can newly recruit them. There's another factor about stakeholders' buy-in. If you have a change management, of course you would need your team members to agree upon the change steps and objectives such that they would help you move the change onwards. The third point to consider is about technology. The technology required should be already adopted in certain use cases that your suggestion would not be research and developing new technology, as that would take too much time and is also quite uncertain when it would be available. And lastly, there are a couple of intangible factors you would need to consider. The first one is the legality of that strategy. The second is the organization culture, whether it fits into the culture or whether you would face a lot of resistance when implementing it. And lastly, there are other factors such as schedule, and it depends on the strategy you are recommending as well as the company situations. Going back to our previous example about encouraging exercise, we now choose two different approaches and to evaluate them upon the four different criteria. We have the options on the top that are to give out yoga mats or to launch an app that track and reward people to exercise, as well as the four criteria on the left that are the financial, human, technology, and intangible factors, and we will be looking at them one by one. For financial capital, there are three questions to answer. First, what are the major cost items? Second, their estimated amount. And third, the potential funding sources. We need to make sure that we have enough funds to carry out and pay for these major cost items. For the yoga mat example, we of course need to buy the yoga mats, and assuming that we are distributing 1 million yoga mats and having $50 per mat, we would need to spend $50 million alone for the yoga mat cost. There are other cost items you also need to estimate, such as the inventory cost to store them in warehouses, for example, the driver wages, where you can find the market wage of a driver, cost of administration, like developing the registration system. On the other side, for launching an app, there are also subsequent costs, such as the development and maintenance costs for the app, that you incentivize people to exercise, or the cost of marketing and onboarding the users. As for the potential funding, the government would be the major fund provider for these initiatives, but there are also other possibilities. For instance, there may be yoga mat sponsors to help reduce the cost for producing these yoga mats. Or for the app example, there may be potential reward partner sponsors as well as the app revenue from advertising. Next off, we need to consider whether we have the human capital to carry out these two strategies. For the yoga mat, it is relatively simple because the driver and also the yoga teachers who teach these yoga movements should be readily available in the market. On the second side, as for the app example, we would need to hire the programmers to develop the app and also fitness coaches. Both examples here should be relatively simple because these professions are both on the market and they are easy to reach through recruiting websites. On the other side, we need to consider the buy-in from the different stakeholders in society. The Legislative Council are important for both initiatives because they need to pass the bill such that the solutions could be carried out. The public, for certain, are also important stakeholders as they are the one to agree or disagree upon the initiative and actually make it effective. And lastly, there are the different stakeholders depending on the solutions, such as the yoga centers and also the reward partners. The next question is about the technological readiness. For the yoga mat, it is also relatively simple for the registration system or the free giveaway. On the app point of view, however, although it is quite simple to develop the app, on the tracking may be quite complicated whether we need to use a smart device to track people's exercise or we just believe on people's input that they said they have exercised. If there is a need for an additional device to track the exercise, it would directly impact onto the financial and human capitals required. However, for the adoption, it is relatively readied because these technologies had been used in different devices and in different programs. And lastly, about intangible factors, we need to consider all these factors before we are sure that the strategy can be implemented. Most importantly is about the legal boundary. For free giveaway, there should be no breach of any laws or principles, but that for an app could be quite problematic because people may be cautious of their privacy that you are tracking their exercise and their daily habits. On the other side, there may be questions about the favorism in we are partnering with some retailers to give out rewards. The next consideration about schedule is how long it would take to implement the strategy and whether it is within the given time period. If it is about COVID exercising, then the time taken to develop the app may already be too long when COVID has been a thing of the past. And lastly, we also need to consider the safety. That is the most important factor during a COVID situation. If people are doing yoga at home, it is relatively safe as you can still do the social distancing. However, for launching an app to track people exercising, there is actually no limitation to whether they exercise at home or actually have a risk of spreading it if they are exercising out of home. Having analyzed these two strategies from a feasibility point of view, we now can confidently come up with the evaluation, again in a 3-point scale. And with this in mind, we can suggest a solution that is of high feasibility. Notice here that the weighing of different factors really depends on the strategy and also the organization. There are important things that you need to note. The first is that the technology readiness is the most crucial factor, that the recommendation you give out should already be technologically feasible. Otherwise, developing a completely new technology is very costly and risky. Second is that the importance of financial capital depends on the organization. Government can mobilize huge fundings, while established companies usually have more cash than that of startups, and so they are also easier in making big pledges in financial commitments. And lastly, there are different methods for companies to fund the projects, either by loans, by funding rounds, going listed, or from their retained earnings. Lastly, intangible factors can make or break this strategy, even though you may find it harder to conceptualize. For exercising during COVID, safety should be the most important factor. And for M&A, you also need to consider the company cultures, whether the two partners could be compatible and actually merge as one. And for product launch, the high schedule feasibility can help the company get an early mover advantage, which is also an important consideration. With all these in mind, we now can conclude the feasibility from 4 different perspectives. But this is not the end of the story, as we also need to consider the effectiveness side in order to give out the best recommendations. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.